Welcome to the Better Together podcast, where we look for ways we can work together to advance the gospel of Jesus Christ. Today we have with us Mr. Sal Zagsaw. He is in Selma, California at the Grace Church right now, and right there with him is another gentleman by the name of Stephen Hicks. He is responsible, if you visit Grace Church in Selma, California, he's the one that makes the place look so good. And so, hey, Sal and Mr. Stephen, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you.
Well, our listeners have heard us talk about the need for men to answer the call to preach the gospel. I know, Sal, you preached your first sermon a couple of weeks ago. I do wonder, though, it doesn't sound like you came out of the womb wanting to follow Jesus. How did you find yourself wanting to follow Jesus along the way? What were you like a couple of years ago, Sal?
Well, growing up in the city of Fresno, California, I had a really rough start. Great family, but just the crowd, the people I pretty much followed around, and in a very bad crowd. Got into a lot of trouble growing up, and my mom comes to church with us as well. And just every time I see her, I just think about all the trouble I put her through. But as I got a little bit older and got my family, and we started kind of like settling down a little bit, we ended up purchasing a house back in 2021 here in Selma, California, and everything happened. I used to say everything happened by chance, and now I understand that, God doesn't work by chance, that there was a plan all the way along, and I didn't quite understand it then. We got our house really cheap, a really good interest rate. Just everything fell into place like perfect. And so from there, I remember thinking, I'm doing good, I'm fine, I'm taking care of my family. I go to work, providing financially, but my life pretty much consisted of going to work, coming home, sitting in my garage, working on my project van, drinking. My wife says I was an alcoholic, but I feel like if I come home and I sit in my garage by myself and turn on some worldly music and sit there and drink beer by myself, one after another every day, I felt like now I can see from, the outside perspective, it wasn't good for me.
Yeah.
And then I had the mentality, and I learned now, I had the mentality of, as long as I provided financially, my job was done for the day. So I come home and I just do whatever I wanted to do, and kind of really didn't do too much outside of that. And I got to a point now where I realized I was in really, really bad shape my whole life.
Wow. So you're going along, you did get in, it was a whole lot different as you were younger. So you really were making progress. You had grown in many ways. You had your house and had moved to Selma. You're letting us know, though, even though you had improved in your life, so to speak, you didn't have, I think you're going to tell us in a little bit, you didn't have Jesus. And so your life was more of, I work, I'm providing for my family, I'm doing okay. And so you're kind of going along in that part of your life. And we're going to talk about in a minute where you two came together. But before we do that, did you always follow the Lord, Mr. Stephen? What was your life like?
No, I was raised by my father and my stepmother, and his whole general thought of living life was, just trust in your heart. It won't lead you too far astray, which is wrong. I found myself at a place where I'd been through 2 divorces.
It was rough, wasn't it?
It was rough. It still is. It's still there. The scars are still there.
Mm-hmm.
But I found myself, my second wife left. She just woke up one morning and said, "Hey, I don't love you anymore. I'm out of here," and took my 2 precious kids with her. And the next door neighbor lady that was her best friend was a preacher's daughter, but she used to come by our house, and she would bring the marijuana, and we would sit down and smoke a joint before we'd go to church. And I thought, well, that's okay, you know. And but anyway, she left right after that. About the same time my second wife left, she left, and she went to be with her brother in Hawaii and stayed there for a while. And all of a sudden, she writes us a letter back because she got to know my sister also that was living with me after my second wife left. And she wrote this letter, said, "Hey, I'm coming back home. I want to see you guys, but I've really changed." And I thought, okay. So she got back and she walks into our house and she brings a box of stuff in of all this, drinking glasses and half a gallon of vodka and the smoking dope that we used to smoke together. And she put it on my table and says, "Hey, I don't need this anymore." And she says, "I've got Jesus now." And it radically changed her life. You could see it. And then she had met a guy and she was moving back to Hawaii with her brother and staying there. And so she left. And while after that, I remember thinking, wow, I wish I had that kind of peace in my life that she had. It was just so obvious, And I remember standing at work one day and just asking God to help me.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize it at the time because that kind of life went on, normal after that. But I ran into the woman that is now my wife. And I met her and one other couple at a Kmart Christmas party. And make a long story short, Pastor Charles Rome, that was the leader of our church, our pastor, had just taken over Grace Free Will Baptist Church. And he got the list of all the people that weren't coming to church. And one of those was Cindy's best friend, the one that I met that night, that Christmas party. And she was in a hospital. And so my pastor went up and seen her, Charles Rome, and seen her and led her back to the Lord. Well, the first thing they do is ask me and Cindy to come to church. And that's when it started.
Wow.
And I remember very clearly, like it was yesterday, that we were sitting over on this side of the church and about third pew back, and altar call was given. And I was standing there gripping the pew like I was a big old baby and just crying. I couldn't let go of the pew. And finally, Cindy, that we weren't married yet. We got married shortly after that. But we weren't married yet, but she grabbed my hand and said, "Can we go to the altar, please?" And I went. I was so relieved, and head up to the altar and I prayed with Pastor Charles Rome, and never been the same since.
Wow. So in many ways, you were kind of on the wrong road as well. And
yes,
things are starting to happen. People around you starting to get right with the Lord, starting to follow the Lord. And Brother Stephen, this was like over 20 years ago, wasn't it? When you
it was 1982. That's been 42 years now.
Wow.
42 years.
Oh man. So the fellow that Sal knows is a lot different than the guy that he would have known in 1981 had he been here, right?
Yeah.
But you've been following the Lord for quite a while, been just a good leader there at the church and in the community. And so here you were on the wrong track. You start following the Lord and your life really does change. And you've been following him for 40 plus years. And then, Sal, let's talk about how you all met. What was the day like when God, you're kind of alluding to it here. You're like, you used to think things were by chance, and now you realize God's been at work. Tell us a bit about how God put Stephen in your life. How did that happen?
So I think like we've been so busy here that it feels like years. Like
Yeah.
I've been here for years. I was under the impression I've been coming to church for a little over 2.5 years, and Brother Steve just let me know the other day that he was going through some insurance papers and stuff like that. and it was
May the 9th.
May
May
the
the
9th.
9th.
Was 2 years ago, 2022.
Yeah, so and that was all of this kind of like plays into it. I wake up that morning, and my wife is gonna be upset with this, but she has a real bad habit of not closing anything. So she makes my coffee that morning while I'm heading out the door, and I just grab it and I get inside my truck and I put my cup in the coffee holder, which is way taller than my coffee holder can do. So I get on the road. Four houses down, there's a really sharp turn in our neighborhood, and the roads are really narrow. So I turn, and my cup of coffee tips over, and I reach down to grab it, and boom, I hit the truck parked on the side of the road. So I hit it, and I kind of pull up in front of it a little bit, and I get out, and I'm shaking. I've never been in an accident. It's early in the morning. I haven't even got a drink of my coffee yet, so I'm shaking, and I panic. So I turn around and I see Brother Steve coming out, and I'm like, I'm sorry, like I hit your truck, and and from what I remember, and I might have just made this up in my head, but I recall Brother Steve being so calm and like, don't worry about it, and there's don't worry about it, calm down. I say, well, how does this work? Do we call the cops? What do we have to do here? He says, don't worry about it. Like, and I remember specifically a few things. He says, is your truck still running? I said, yeah, I just kind of messed up my front light, and there's nothing leaking out of there. The radiator, everything's still good. And he says, well, it looked like you did more damage to your truck. I had a 2001 Chevy, and his was a 74 Chevy. So his truck did more damage to mine than mine did to his. So I remember him telling me like, well, go ahead and get to work, and go take care of your day. Don't worry about it. We'll deal with this another time. Everything's okay. And I'm like, oh well, I have to clean up all this broken glass, and all the lights and everything all over the floor. And he says, I'll take care of it. Don't worry about it. And I'm thinking this whole time, like, this guy is just so calm. Like, why he's not yelling at me? Why, I expect this because I work in property maintenance, and we deal with tenants, and we deal with the public. And every day somebody wants to fight us out there in the work field because we park in front of their parking, which is public parking. Tenants want us to fix something, which we can't unless a work order is put in. So even though I can just grab a screwdriver and fix something, I'll get in trouble and I'll be liable for it if I do it out of a work order. So trying to explain this to people, like, they're just a lot of disgruntled people out there. So going from that to this situation, I was just like, what's going on here? So I asked Brother Steve, can you bring a broom out? I'll sweep it up. I'll take care of it. So he's like, sure. So he brings a broom. I remember sweeping it up, and I say, I'll figure out the insurance thing, and I don't even know how it works, and I'll get to you by the end of the day. And the whole time, don't worry about it. Just relax, like, calm down. I'm like, okay. So I get in my truck and I leave. And I remember getting in and feeling so relieved after all this happened so early in the morning. Just the continuance of, calm down, relax, it's okay, don't worry about it, it's nothing. And until this day, Brother Steve will say, like you mentioned earlier, the vintage truck.
Yeah.
So Brother Steve will call it an ugly old truck. And for us, I'm 34 years old. It's a 74 Chevy. It's a square body. They're really popular with people my age. The way that when I hit it, just the way it looked then, you could easily sell it for about $10,000. Like, it's for us, it's considered a vintage car. For
Yeah.
Brother Steve, it was just a little work truck that he had to come out here and haul things around for the church and stuff like that. But I was thinking, man, I just hit a model car, like, and getting in there and just being so calm, and like, I went on to work and told my coworkers, like, man, I hit a truck, and the guy wasn't even mad at me. And like, I was just so concerned about Brother Steve's demeanor, his attitude, and the way he carried himself that morning. And I'll be honest with you, I said, man, this has to be just a old hippie guy or something in that house, like, nobody's calm like that,
Used to be.
like, you don't see people calm like that. You hit somebody's car, they want to fight you. You see it all over social media every day, people fighting over the smallest things. So
Yeah.
it was definitely, I would say, at that time, it was a cultural shock for me, to
Yeah.
see somebody being so well behaved. I just didn't know how to react to it. But that was pretty much that whole morning on my mind. What's going on in that little house over there on East Street in Selma, California?
That's good. So he reacted in such a way, like, is he in there smoking marijuana? I mean, what is going on with
Yeah,
him? It's so cool and calm.
yeah,
Now 40 plus years ago, he might have been in there smoking marijuana, but not today. He's
yeah.
on to something else. So, Brother Steve, what in the world? So, what was your perspective that morning?
Well, I just remember me and my wife were sitting in our dining room area of our house, and the window in it looked straight out towards the street. And all of a sudden, we hear this big loud bang, and I didn't think anything about it. There's always noise going on, and I'm not hearing as well as I used to. But she looked out the window and said, "Hey, somebody just hit your truck," you know. And there's a red truck parked out in front of it. And I thought, well, okay, let's go check it out. And just walked out there and wanted to know basically if he was okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because there was a time in my life where I would have been in there smoking dope, but that truck would have meant a whole lot to me.
Yeah.
But I've learned over the years that, like Paul said, I mean, I just count it as waste. It's nothing, It's just an old beat up truck that a lot of people like. I kind of think it's cool too. It doesn't have any computers or anything on it, but it's just an old truck. It gets me from point A to point B, about 1.5 miles from my house to the church and back. That's all I use it for. And I was just worried about him, and and then just got to talking with him, and then seeing he was about half scared to death. I was going to come out there and beat him up or something. I'm going, but just hey, I was just worried about him, if he was all right. The truck's fixable. And since then, I learned how to fix the thing. But what I did with it when I fixed it is I left one dent right above the headlight. I left it in there for that reason, for memory.
Yeah.
So whenever people look at my next truck, when I get it painted one of these days, people say, "Why'd you leave that dent in there for?" Hey, let me tell you, because it's a very important day in my life. Like he said, man, that God orders those moments in his life, and we need to be prepared for them.
That's great. And so, wow, if you coming out there, Brother Steve, with that attitude, whew, what is going on? That's what Sal's thinking. And really, Sal, it sounds like a First Peter kind of 3 thing, right? It's like, what is going on in that house? What is up with that guy? And so what happened next after he was so cool and calm, and you go to work and you tell people about it? What was the next thing that went along?
So like a couple days leading up to that, I got to learn how insurance works. I remember another big part of it was, getting the truck fixed, especially, that model and, the time and everything that's going to go into it. I was thinking it's going to cost an arm and a leg to fix the damage I did. Well, I remember Brother Steve calling me because the insurance came to check my truck. They gave me a quote on what it was going to cost, the insurance company, and where I was going to take it. And I said, well, I'm more concerned about my neighbor. What's going to happen with his truck, or how are you guys going to make that right? And they said he agreed to take a check, and he's done with it, and he'll fix it himself. And the check, in comparison to what that, just the parts by itself was going to cost, mine's was more expensive because it was newer, and I was taking it to the shop. So I remember him calling me and said, "Hey, your insurance is really cool. Like, they cut me a check, and I'm excited, and this is going to take care of it way more than what I need, and I'm going to do the job, and it's going to be fine, and don't worry about it, and I'm happy." And there was just a lot of excitement about, that getting taken care of, that I just felt so relieved. Like, I was just like, it was just a big burden lifted off me, because, we're less than a year in this neighborhood, and I didn't want to have a bad start with my neighbors and just no trouble. And I remember him being excited about that, and I thought to myself, if it was me, I would not be excited about that. Like I need more, because it's gonna be, me having to come out of pocket to fix it and whatnot. So that's kind of where he started coming over, and I had another truck that I had to take, my working truck. I had to turn it into the shop. So I had an older truck, and I started working on it and trying to keep that one up for work. And during this following, week or two, Brother Steve would come down. We stay about 4 or 5 houses down, and he would walk over there and he'll, hey neighbor, what's going on? How can I help you? And I'll be under the hood and he'll check it out and we'll talk. And I remember these were the first spiritual conversations I ever had. And now I understand. Then I didn't understand, but now I understand that the Holy Spirit was present, because on any other day I would not listen to anybody. Like you start talking about spiritual stuff, and I didn't want to hear it. I didn't have no time for it. And so Brother Steve started out real basic, like I learned later on what witnessing is because we go do it. But he started asking me the basic questions, like where did I stand in my faith? What did God look like to me? What did I think about, Jesus? And where I was headed when I died. And I remember him specifically asking me on one of these meetups, he said, if you died today and you were standing in front of God, what would you tell him when he asked you, why should I let you in through my gates? And I said, well, I'm a good person. Like somebody calls me right now and I'll go help them. And I think I'm doing pretty good, like the bills are paid in my house. If there's any kind of financial thing, I'll go out and I'll do an extra job. And I'm willing to make ends meet for my family, and help anybody. Anybody calls me, I'm always there for them. And, they can always count on me. I'm a decent person. And Brother Steve tells me, and do you think that's going to get you into heaven? And I stop and I think, well, if he's asking me this question, then that might not be the right answer. And so then he let me know, like, in scripture, it tells us that our salvation is not based off of our good works and our deeds and things that we do ourselves. And he explained to me that, and this is something, I guess, different when, we go and talk to people and we don't tell them specifically, but you kind of like walk them through, like they're on their way to hell. Well, Brother Steve told me in a very nice way that I was on my way to hell. And so after closing up the truck and going inside, I remember walking in the room, and my wife, she had a little bit of spiritual upbringing. Her parents today are about 25 years born again Christians. They only speak Spanish though. So during COVID, finding a Spanish speaking church in our area that's a good Christian church is kind of hard. They do come to our church now, even though it's in English. They'll sit here and they, they'll try to pick up what they can. On that note, I walk in and I tell her, like, I don't know what's going on right now. Brother Steve told me some stuff, and I'm everywhere right now, and I'm actually scared of. I think I'm on my way to hell. And my wife is looking at me like, you play too much. You're always like, thinking outside of the box, and like that was me thinking worldly before. And I tell her, well, we're going to church this weekend, and that's it. And she said, okay, well, let's go. And we started coming here, and I remember it was probably on my second or third week. We come in, and like Brother Steve said, and he told me stories during this time about being in the pew and altar calls and trying to understand that. And I remember I was gripping onto the back of the pew, and I was like, oh, and I wanted to go up there so bad, but just that carnal nature just holding me back while the Holy Spirit's fighting with it. And I didn't understand none of that at the time, but now I do. And I remember after service, Pastor Stan talking to me in the foyer and says, hey, where are you at right now? Like, where do you feel you're at? And I go, today there was just something tugging on me. Like I wanted to go up there so bad, and I just couldn't. And he says, you feel like you're ready to accept the Lord? And immediately, I didn't understand it at the time, but I just started crying in the foyer, and we walked, I started walking to the altar, and Pastor Stan followed me, prayed with me. And that day I accepted the Lord. And a lot of people say it, and we watch from actions and stuff like that. They say they accepted the Lord, and nothing really ever changes. And I remember my life changing dramatically. I remember that, and I hear the stories of people, real godly people, explaining the day that they found the Lord and their life changing dramatically. My life changed. It wasn't until a few days later I went home, threw away all of our liquor, all of our beer. I stopped drinking. I haven't drank or thought about drinking in these last 2 years. Um, and just everything started coming together for us. Just one after another. As I started learning the power of prayer, I sit there and I pray, and God is moving in our life, and we can count the blessings, and we see it. We see God working, all the way up until the point. This will be my first week. I started my new city job. I have a pension to look forward to now. I have an actual career, benefits for my family, great health care, and we've never had any of that. Like, things are just happening in our life, and I'm so excited about it. I started going out witnessing with Brother Steve on most Saturdays. We don't get out there all the time. My schedule changed on Saturdays now, but we go visit our bus kids. I'm involved with the bus ministry now. Um, I was asked if I wanted to speak this last February, and everything in me was tugging on me. I was nervous, and Pastor Stan explained to me, you don't need to be nervous. God is with you, and the Holy Spirit is going to walk you through it. And I said, I'm ready to do it. Let's get up there. And I got up there. It was the most challenging thing I ever did in my life, and it was the greatest experience that I had. I loved it. The support that I got from our church, which led me into the teen ministry. So now I'm the youth director with our high school and middle school kids, and I get to tell them I did everything bad, so I can tell you guys what that looks like and why not to do it. I don't have to sit here and tell you, don't do this, because I have an idea of what it might look like. I can tell you I've been there, done it, and you shouldn't do it. And that's pretty much where I'm at today.
That's great, Sal. And so, wow, it started with the wreck, then you might say the reaction, and then just questioning how could a guy be like this, and then he continues to surprise you. He's coming over and helping you and doing talking about spiritual things that you would have never listened to before. Boom, leads to the church, and even your wife's family's got a little bit of that involved because they've been following the Lord for many, many years. And then it's really led to you being involved in the bus ministry there at the church. And you didn't mention the sound, but anyway, you've been helping with the sound and all the rest of it, right?
Oh, you got to experience that with me. That was my first time dealing with that. I did learn, Brother Steve being my mentor, and my best friend. And I'll be honest with you, I only have one best friend, and it's Brother Steve. You could tell the difference between a godly person and a person that they're still struggling. They still have a lot of struggles. They're not quite there yet. There's a big difference in it. So when me and Brother Steve talk, which on average we spend about 5 hours a week, spiritual talk and conversations, and he's always let me know if you see something there, just take initiative, get in there. And if it's your calling, God's going to let you know. And if it's not your calling, somebody will step in, but just take initiative and see where you fit in, And little by little, I'm understanding what that means. Sound might not be my greatest gift, but if I can help out, I'll get in there. Anything I can help out with, ushering around the church, welcoming people inside, and learning what that looks like. And pretty much just kind of trying to see what I can help out with. I guess Pastor Stan calls it a laborer. I'm a laborer. I like to work with my hands. I'm in construction, so
yeah. But you're also willing. So you look, is there a need? You try to help, and it's really like Mr. Steve saying, "Hey, you'll know this is not my thing." The projector's not my thing. But there's there's other things that are my thing, and we jump on it. What a great story. And Mr. Steve, it makes me think, what if you had come out as a grumpy man? What if you had a different demeanor? What a difference you've made in Sal's life, and we could even say your neighborhood and even your church's life. What would the church be like without Sal and his family in it? So thank you for your willingness to share and to invest time in Sal, and thank you for being ready when somebody runs into the back of your car to present Jesus.
Yeah, you didn't get to meet my wife that day. You came just a little bit after she had headed out. We had to make the church baseball game that night.
Yes.
I spent the better part of 12 hours at church at the meeting. So then she showed up and got the Pastor Chris Little Creek.
Yes. She was there for that, right?
Yeah, she got to hear the whole sermon.
Yeah.
And then immediately she headed out to go get ready for the baseball game.
Yes.
But my wife was a little bit slower. She's a little bit slower in her growth. She's really timid, but she did accept the Lord and was baptized a year after me. I have three daughters. We're getting them involved more in the church, trying to get them to get into routine. Well, what I can share with you is that, 32 years old, at the time, a 14 and a 13-year-old daughter with a 8-9-year-old daughter. Not them not knowing the Lord, us not knowing the Lord. It's a bigger challenge for us as we started walking with the Lord, having older teenagers and trying to get them to understand what that looks like, because early on we got the questions of like, why do you guys have to go to church? And like, what does this mean? And why are we changing stuff? And why we can't do this and we can't do that, and having to explain to them all the time, like, these things are bad. And I have to apologize all the time because I was leading my family wrong, and they get to see it around their friends and everything. And it's normalized. So it doesn't seem wrong to them. But it's a big challenge. And I don't regret, walking with the Lord and having to deal with my kids, because there could be conflict a lot of times, because they don't want to listen, when we're trying to tell them it's wrong, and what does the Bible say about that, and they'll have something to say, but we kind of, just stay the course and try to be real humble with them and not provoke them. But for anybody that's struggling with that, you find the Lord later on in life, and your kids are older. It's not going to be easy. I won't say that it's going to be easy. It's a challenge, though. But we're staying the course, definitely.
I hear you, Sal. But imagine what it would be like if it were another 10 years, or if you still didn't know the Lord. So I think all our listeners, we need to be praying for you, praying for your family, praying for Mr. Steve and more opportunities. But imagine what it would be like if we went back in time 3 years ago. It's a whole lot better than it was,
Amen.
So,
and there's a lot of good times. There's little things that the Lord will put on our hearts and soften it more and more and more. Like, me and my wife are doing teen ministry. So on Wednesdays and some Sunday mornings, we're dealing with the high school, middle school kids. On average, we get about 10 teens in there. So when we go home and trying to get my kids into Wednesday has been a challenge. But, our church kids they understand. They say, some of them been coming here for 8-10 years already. And they'll say, well, they'll understand over time. It's not easy for them. It's only been 2 years. They'll get it. They'll understand. So when I go home, I say, hey, our church family was asking about you guys again. And they're like, oh, what did they say? And, and we get to witness to them there.
Yeah.
There's little things where they'll say, well, why do you like your church class better than us? I say, it's not that I like them better than you guys. They don't argue with me. They don't talk back to me. They're grateful for every little thing that we give them, even if it's a little snack or something after class. And they say, well, it's because they're not your kids. You wouldn't see us doing that to, pastor's wife. I say, oh, wow, okay. Well, at least you guys are being respectful outside of the house to everyone else, right? And little things like that, we get to explain to them, like, you guys need to work on this and you guys need to work on that. And that's why you guys feel this way. and trying to lead them to the cross little by little.
Well, you're on the right road, brother, and I appreciate you guys just taking the time. I know it's pretty early out there in where you're at in California, but you sharing your story, I think it gives people hope. So, Sal, many people probably know folks who are not following the Lord, and it helps them think, I need to think about, I can reach out to someone like Sal and I can be there for them. And really, even what you're talking about, Brother Steve, going through having the two marriages that were so hurtful, but God got a hold of you, and look at how he's used you in the life of Sal, how he's used you at the church and there in the Selma community. I think it really is good for our listeners to hear how God does wonderful things when we turn to him and follow him. So thank you both for taking the time to join us today.
And please pray, have listeners pray for our bus ministry, please. It's getting to be a harder thing to do than it ever has been. Please.
So I want our listeners to hear what Mr. Steve just said. There's really, about 300,000 people in a 10-minute drive of this particular spot where Steve and Sal are at. So pray that the bus ministry will take off so many folks from different parts of the world that need the gospel. So pray for them. Ask God to use them. And maybe you're a listener and you're thinking, hey, I'd like to do something like this, or I'd like to see this in my own community. I want to encourage you to think about using an initiative called the Hope Initiative. So you could go to nafwb.org/hope. Just like Mr. Steve was ready that day that Sal came up and ran into his vehicle, we can be ready when we study a little bit, we're prepared to share the gospel, and we're thinking outwardly rather than inwardly. And so that's an intervention that could help us with. So thank you for sharing that, Mr. Steve, and thank you for our listeners for taking the time to join us today. Thank you all for listening. Remember, this podcast is brought to you by the National Association of Free Will Baptists. One way you can support the National Association of Free Will Baptists is by giving to the Together Way Trust. Every dollar you give to the Together Way Trust will be used by the Lord until the Lord returns. It stays there in the trust, and the ministry or the proceeds from the trust are actually used for ministry. So go to nafwb.org and support the efforts of our denominational agencies today. Thank you for joining us today. Remember, every little thing we do really does matter because we're better together. Thank you.